Power Rangers. It's a fun, silly, goofy franchise, and we all love it for that. But also, sometimes it can change tone. The Ranger we're going to be talking about today is an allegory for nuclear weapons. Yeah, how's that for a video introduction? This is the Dark Ranger, my personal favorite Power Rangers character of all time, and also one with maybe the strangest production record in the franchise's history. The Dark Ranger technically started off in one of the live action shows, then was adapted and heavily expanded upon in the Power Rangers comics, and then briefly returned to the show. As my intro clip just a few seconds ago probably made pretty clear, this character's story is absolutely wild, and I'll warn you right up front because this is kind of an intriguing promise, get ready for a huge change in tone about halfway through this one because, well, they don't do the nuclear weapons allegory in the live-action kids show, so some things have gotta change for this story to work. No need for a long intro today, I have given you a hell of a pitch and now I need to deliver on it. First, though, we have to talk about this character's original appearance in the shows, so let's just hop right into things. To start talking about the Dark Ranger, we need to begin with the Power Rangers series he was introduced in, that being also my favorite Power Rangers show, Power Rangers Dino Charge. We'll begin by covering some baseline things about how the lore of this show works, though, in this case, lore might be a strong word, at least for the next couple of minutes. The Dino Charge Rangers are powered by these ancient artifacts called Energems, which were created millions of years ago by the alien race known as the Morphin Masters. The Masters made the Energems and a bunch of other Ranger power sources, and then just kinda shot them off into space so that they would make Ranger teams to protect the universe from evil. And there's not actually a lot else there in terms of backstory. I promise there's deep lore that we're going to go into today, but also this is still Power Rangers, and so a lot of the lore from the shows is going to be, simple to say the least. Now, a lot of Energems were made, which is one of the reasons that Power Rangers Dino Charge has such a large roster. There are 10 Rangers here: red, black, blue, green, pink, gold, aqua, purple, silver, and graphite. Yes, his official canon color is not gray, it is graphite. I don't know why, but that is what they went with. Each of these Rangers was chosen by one of the gems, selected specifically to be a Ranger because they are worthy and pure of heart. This does mean that the gems themselves are semi-sentient, possibly because they were bonded to the souls of dinosaurs a couple million years ago, which is weird, but par for the course when it comes to Power Rangers, I guess. That whole magical selection process aside, the Energems are still extremely valuable even if they are not with somebody who has been deemed worthy. How this works is never fully explained, but they are a power source that anybody can access, and therefore, once the danger of them was recognized, an order of guardians known only as Keepers was formed to protect them. None of this is too unreasonable so far for the genre. There are magic space batteries that choose worthy people and give them superpowers. Almost every Power Ranger show is a variation on that in one way or another. But of course, this cannot be that simple, because while there are 10 Energems that are little chunks of cosmic good, there is an 11th one as well. Behold, the Dark Energem. This space battery is evil. Like, literally, it is made out of pure, concentrated evil. Why did the Morphin Masters also make an evil space battery to go along with the 10 good ones that they made? I don't know, balance or something? This is never really explained. I do promise we're gonna get to good, emotional, interesting storytelling later, but we kinda just have to wade through the poorly explained show backstory first. The last bit of important setup information before we get to the actual character we're going to be talking about today is to note that the Dark Energem is individually the most powerful of the set, but where it stacks up to the combined strength of the 10 good Energems is kind of up in the air. It is stated within Power Rangers Dino Charge that to destroy the Dark Energem, it would take the combined force of all of the good ones at once, which, yeah, that makes sense. Unite all the good artifacts, you can break the bad one. However, the show also states that the Dark Energem is strong enough to nullify the abilities of all of the other Energems. Whichever of these is technically more true doesn't actually matter that much for our purposes. All that matters is that there was a risk that the Dark Energem could corrupt the others, and so it was decided that it needed to be guarded separately. Cue the 10 good Energems eventually making their way to Earth, while the Dark Energem was sent far across the galaxy. And now, after 3.5 minutes of largely nonsense, the storyline's actually going to make sense and we can talk about characters from here on out. The Dark Energem was hidden on a planet named Sentai 6, which is a great little Easter egg reference to Super Sentai, the original show that Power Rangers draws a lot of its footage from. Sometime before Dino Charge begins, Sentai 6 is attacked by a villain named Lord Arcanon. Arcanon is your very classic evil space overlord type guy. He wants to collect all the Energems so that he can gain immense power and rule the universe. Also, yes, his design is based on the Statue of Liberty, and no, that is not relevant to his character in Dino Charge, it's just a thing from the Super Sentai. Claiming the Dark Energem was Arcanon's first goal in his conquest, and he did not care what or who he had to go through to find it. The who, in this case, ended up being the entire population of the planet. Arcanon obliterates the surface of Sentai 6, turning the entire place into a barren, empty landscape. He is successful by doing this, though, finding the Energem and eliminating any guardians that it may have had. But there is still one more person standing between the villain and his prize, a random civilian named Heckle. We don't actually know too much about Heckle's backstory before Arcanon's invasion. We know he was a nice guy, and he clearly had some sort of heroic spirit in him, as the first time we ever meet him chronologically is when he is desperately trying to save a box containing the Energem from the army actively pursuing him. For all his noble intent, though, Heckle was ultimately just a guy, maybe with some alien superpowers, which we will come back to later, but not enough to fight off Arcanon. As he is running, one of Arcanon's lasers strikes the ground near his feet, causing him to fall, and the box to open. In a last-ditch effort, Heckle desperately reaches out and grabs the alien artifact, which does empower him, but it's not turning him into a ranger, not quite yet. The Dark Energem has other plans. At this point, we need to talk about how exactly Dark Energem corruption works. It doesn't just immediately turn you evil if you touch it. I mean, it also does do that, but it does a little bit more, mainly in the form of creating a distinct evil persona that exists within the person who is using the Energem's power. In Heckle's case, this newly formed Dark Reflection is a monstrous being known as Snide. Yes, their names are Heckle and Snide. It's a very clear Jekyll and Hyde reference, and as cheesy as it is, you're just gonna have to deal with it for now. At this point, you might think that the Dark Energem's guardian being turned means that Arcanon has gained a powerful new ally. But no, Arcanon doesn't actually care about Heckle and Snide that much. All he wants is the Energem, so he simply takes that off the newly formed villain and then goes away, leaving them to their own devices. Heckle and Snide then go on to be independent supervillains, and yes, I said Heckle and Snide are villains. While they are a Jekyll and Hyde reference, their dynamic is not exactly the same. This is not a one good guy and one bad guy sharing a body situation. Heckle and Snide are both distinctly evil, but for different magical reasons. Snide is evil because he is a metaphysical creation made from a literal chunk of crystallized evil. That's to be expected. But Heckle being evil is a little bit more strange, and this is because that Dark Energem corruption happens in two forms at the same time. The gem also erased Heckle's memories of the events and twisted his formerly kind and heroic self into something a lot more sinister. This sounds a little bit redundant right now. I mean, why bother with the dual personality thing if they're both bad guys? But it will be expanded upon later, so remember that this is the case and we'll loop it back in. As a newly formed villain team? I don't really know if team is the right word here, but regardless, Heckle and Snide wreak havoc across the galaxy. Only one of them can exist in the physical world at a time, but they can switch back and forth at will, and both forms have their different uses. Snide is an incredible fighter and far more physically resilient, plus he has a magical katana for some reason, because this is Power Rangers, and if it's cool, why not do it? Then if Snide is the brawn of the operation, Heckle is the brains. He is a very charismatic and strategic villain, and also he can shoot what is essentially force lightning like the Emperor from Star Wars. That's not necessarily a brains type power, but it is extremely strong, even able to counter the energies of an Energem for a short period of time. And yeah, once again, it's Power Rangers. If it's cool, sure. Since their unique dual existence gives the pair an edge in many different areas, Heckle and Snide's rampage lasts for quite a long time, but eventually they are brought in by a bounty hunter named Sledge. From this point on, we're going to move kinda quickly for a bit because weirdly, most of Heckle's time as a villain on Dino Charge isn't really that important to his story. He is a monster of the week type guy, but there are some important developments, so we'll just go fast and get to those so that we can spend more time on the good stuff. Heckle and Snide work for and alongside Sledge for quite some time, actually being powerful enough within the organization that Sledge appoints them a temporary leader as he goes to work on some other business. This makes Heckle and Snide the second boss villain of Dino Charge, and they're pretty good at that. They don't win, of course, but thanks to the fact that Heckle specifically looks so human, they are very good at espionage-type operations and messing with the Rangers. When everybody the Rangers are fighting is a big alien monster, and one of them can turn human-looking at any time, I mean, yeah, that's pretty nice. Eventually, though, things begin to crash and burn as Lord Arcanon shows back up. He had been spying on Sledge's operation the entire time, and now that they're finally making some headway, he thinks it's time to step in and claim the Energems for himself. Now, you might think at this point, wow, Arcanon must not be very good at his job if he's just been trying to find the Energems this entire time and hasn't managed to get any. And that would not be entirely accurate. He still has the Dark Energem, and he also managed to acquire one of the good ones as well, that being the Silver Energem. One slight problem for Arcanon, though, the Silver Energem was already claimed. It was bonded to a host, one of the Energem keepers, an alien named Xenowing. Now, Arcanon probably could have just tried to kill the Silver Ranger and take the Energem off his corpse, but since the gems are sentient and prefer good hosts, this might have meant that he couldn't have accessed its power individually. And since Lord Arcanon had a magical corrupting artifact in his possession, this gave him an opportunity. He takes the Dark Energem, exposes Xenowing to it, and like what happened with Heckle and Snide, it forces Xenowing to develop a dark alter ego, the monster known as Doomwing. In a surprisingly cool and well thought out little magic system situation here, this does not break the bond that the Silver Energem had created. Since Xenowing is still alive, the gem is still bonded to him, it's just that Xenowing is being suppressed by the Doomwing persona, and that means the power of the Silver Energem is available for the villains to access. But there's a downside to this, or upside from the perspective of the Rangers. Xenowing is not dead. His personality still exists, and thus there is a way that he can be saved. Since Doomwing is fully able to morph, Arcanon sends him into the Ranger team as a double agent, but when he's the Silver Ranger, he kinda shows his cards a little bit too early, and the Rangers, along with their mentor figure, another Keeper, simply named Keeper, are able to figure out what's going on and start looking for solutions. The option they find comes in the form of a device known as a split emitter. This thing can separate the two personas created by Dark Energem corruption, and the Rangers zap Doomwing with it, freeing Xenowing from the evil influence. Now, after several minutes of not mentioning them, we can loop Heckle and Snide back into the storyline, and you can probably guess where this is going, but there is one more very important step that happens before this. Around this same time, Heckle is starting to go through his own character arc, and this time I do mean Heckle specifically. Arcanon's return and renewed proximity to the Dark Energem is messing with the magical energies that separated Heckle and Snide in the first place, and Heckle is starting to regain some memories. Remembering now that Arcanon was the one who destroyed his homeworld and was responsible for his corruption, Heckle confronts the villain about it, and it does not go well. Arcanon is still way more powerful, and Heckle is defeated pretty easily, especially because Snide is not having a redemption arc. He is a purely evil being created through evil magic, not a good guy who was corrupted, so yeah, he doesn't care that Arcanon is bad. Now we get to one of my favorite little details of how this arc actually progresses. Of course, what you're probably expecting to happen happens. Heckle and Snide get zapped by the split emitters because one of their halves is helpful and the other half is dangerous. The dangerous half is then thrown in a prison cell while the helpful half is recruited to the team. Now, if you noticed I was using very vague and kind of weird wording there, that was on purpose, because the Rangers don't do this, the villains do. This separation does not happen because the Rangers want to save the good guy. It happens because Arcanon only wants to keep Snide around. Snide is still loyal and powerful, so Arcanon just orders his guys to steal the split emitters from the Rangers and then zaps his own dude with it, taking the unproductive side and throwing it in a prison cell while Snide is now free to be a villain. Heckle, now absolutely a good guy again, is able to escape the imprisonment, explains what happened to the Rangers, and joins their team for the final confrontation. While he is weaker without the Snide Half and Dark Energem powers, he does still keep his Force Lightning, though it's kind of unclear if that was ever a Dark Energem thing or just something that his species could do naturally. We're about done with this part of the video, which means we get to move on to the comics, which is where things get a lot more dramatic. However, before we get to that, we have to get to the most buck wild thing in this video, and maybe one of the most buck wild things in Power Rangers as a franchise, which is really saying something. The end of Dino Charge is... Let me just explain it. We're gonna go fast because we do have more important things to get to, and honestly, even if I took more time to explain this, I don't think it would make a lot more sense. With the Dark Energem and all the good Energems in the same place, the Rangers are able to condense the energy of their Energems to destroy the Dark Energem once and for all. But when they do this, the Dark Energem turns into a time portal for some reason. This time portal then sucks in the villain headquarters spaceship and the entire Earth, meaning that the Rangers have to go and do the final battle like millions of years in the past back in dinosaur times. And if this sounds like it's coming absolutely out of nowhere very abruptly, yep, that's what it was like in the show as well. The Rangers do their whole fight, they beat the bad guys, all that stuff. That's actually not the important part for the Dark Ranger storyline. The important parts of this are that this finale causes the entire timeline to be split off into a completely separate one, because thanks to the Rangers having this fight millions of years in the past, as a collateral side effect, they prevent the extinction of the dinosaurs. The main Ranger team then returns to the present, where everything is basically the exact same as how they left it, except dinosaurs are still alive. Don't think too hard about that and how the butterfly effect is just entirely ignored. This is the Power Rangers show, and the lore sometimes just isn't, but there are consequences that actually will have effects for Heckle. As a way to redeem himself, Heckle remains in the past millions of years ago and joins the Keepers organization, becoming the new, or I guess old, guardian of the Dark Energem. This point is so far back in the past that it is before the destruction of Sentai 6. Arcanon, or past younger Arcanon at least, is still around, and he is still on the hunt for the Energems. But since Heckle is from the future and knows how Arcanon is going to attack, by remaining in the past, he can time paradox his way into saving his home planet. This is where Dino Charge actually ends. The status quo for Heckle is just that presumably, yeah, he uses his future knowledge to save Sentai 6, and I guess in this separate timeline, it is still around. But, as you can probably guess by the fact that the Dark Ranger never made a real appearance, and there's a lot of runtime left in this video, it is not the end of his story. It is continued in the Power Rangers comics. Now, before we talk about specifics, let me set the scene for how these comics work. That is a very important bit of context. Two things. One, the Power Rangers comics and the show technically are not in the same continuity. They are completely separate things. They're not even like in a multiverse with each other. They are 100% isolated. But there's a reason for that, which is thing number two. The comics can get dark at times. Now, they're not like R-rated or anything, but the way I usually pitch it is that the comics are written for people who watched Power Rangers as kids and want a similar experience with a lot more depth to it. Since Heckle's story is very interesting, but never gets explored beyond the depth of a Power Rangers live-action show, it was a great candidate for this extra exploration. Thus, in the Power Rangers arc titled Beyond the Grid, we see Heckle make a reappearance. We don't actually find out what happened to him immediately. They reveal him as the Dark Ranger and then explore that middle point in a flashback scene, but I'm going to present this chronologically. Somewhat surprisingly, this flashback scene picks up almost immediately after the end of the Dino Charge show. Again, it's technically a separate continuity, but in this case, it doesn't really feel like one. We see Heckle and Xenowing, who has also remained in the past, returning to Sentai 6. Though I say returning, this is of course returning to the past version of it. This is Heckle returning to his long-lost homeworld before Arcanon ever laid his evil hands upon it. It's a pretty emotional scene, and for good reason. Heckle and Xenowing then quickly get to work prepping for Arcanon's invasion. After all, the Dark Energem is still here. It was not the one that was destroyed, because that was the one in the future. This is the original one. It's time nonsense. Hopefully you get the kind of thing that I'm trying to explain here. They quickly hit a snag, though. While there is plenty of time to prep for Arcanon's invasion, Sentai 6 really just isn't ready for that. It is a calm, peaceful planet to such an extent that it is said in the comic that Sentai 6 does not even know war. This gives the Keepers, Xenowing especially, a moment of pause. Could they turn Sentai 6 into a war planet full of soldiers? Yeah, absolutely they could, and that would probably work. After all, Arcanon would inevitably arrive, and they have to do something instead of leaving these people to their own devices. But on the other hand, war is never good for either side of the conflict. People are going to be hurt and lives are going to be damaged regardless of what is happening. So if there's a way to prep Sentai 6 without exposing this peaceful culture to the horrors of this type of combat, that is what should be explored first. Unfortunately, the range of options that are available to them are extremely limited. Destroying the Dark Energem is off the table. As we saw from Dino Charge, if you break it, it turns into a black hole. They also can't really move the artifact because it's under a lot of magical containment spells. As easy as putting it off-world should be, it's just not practical. Heckle finally brings up that they could maybe just hide the Energem, but then is quick to shoot down his own idea. After all, it was hidden in the previous timeline, and Arcanon proved that he was willing to destroy the entire planet to get to the Energem. That will not protect anybody, in fact, quite the opposite. Xenowing ends up cloaking the Energem regardless though. Even though it's not a permanent solution, it is a peaceful one, and it will give the Keepers more time to plan ahead. And now, we finally arrive at the thing I promised you in the intro 20 minutes ago, the Power Rangers allegory for the use of nuclear weapons in war. After all, the Keepers are sitting on what is essentially a nuke. They have the Dark Energem in their possession. It is contained by a lot of powerful magic, but the Dark Energem within is just as powerful. Again, it has been explicitly stated that this thing is stronger than the other Energems, possibly stronger than all of them combined. It can do a lot of damage, it's just risky. But maybe that risk is worth it in this case, to protect an entire planet of innocent people. And Heckle is quick to suggest this. They could use the Dark Energem to power another Morpher. Xenowing is still a Ranger at this point. He has his Morpher, he has the Silver Energem. They could use his Morpher as a base and make another one. Xenowing immediately shuts this down. Quote, "We don't need a soldier, we need a shield. In this way, we already protect Sentai 6 without conflict, without violence, and without death, saving its life and also its soul." He's right, of course, but Heckle has been through some dark stuff. He has seen the destruction of his world once, and because of that, even though it wasn't entirely his fault, he went on to destroy many other worlds thanks to that Dark Energem corruption. He is willing to do bad things to protect Sentai 6 from a second destruction, and so he starts going ahead with the Ranger project regardless. He is successful at this, at least in a way. In the technical sense, he is able to create a Morpher that is powered by the Dark Energem. But to do this, he needs to access the Energem. He needs to take down the shields and expose its magical signatures to the galaxy so that he can analyze them. And when he does this, Lord Arcanon finds it. By giving Arcanon's forces a point that they can track, the attackers arrive at Sentai 6 early, long before they were supposed to in the original timeline, cutting off Heckle and Xenowing's options for peaceful preparation and forcing combat immediately. With no other options thanks to his own risky actions, Heckle takes the Morpher and activates it for the first time, turning into the Dark Ranger. No going back now, you cannot put that weapon back into a box, and Arcanon makes the symbolism very clear with his next line. "You sent a signal crystal clear. One does not smelt swords unless one plans for war." Now, with that impressive of an intro line, you might think that this is going to be a gigantic fight, but no, this is incredibly quick. Heckle as the Dark Ranger obliterates Arcanon's entire army on the next page, and that is the end of the shot. This is not a battle. This is an instant bloodbath. And with that not being the climax of this storyline, you know things are about to get far worse. In a twist that probably everybody saw coming, the Dark Energem does what the Dark Energem does best, and the corrupting influence begins to seep into Heckle's mind once more. We see him crying out as he floats in space, begging to not be lost again to the darkness as Snide starts to re-emerge from his body. It's quite a scene. But then, who should show up again but Xenowing, whom Heckle had previously trapped so that he could not interfere in Arcanon's attack. Xenowing, however, does not hold a grudge against Heckle for this, quite the opposite. Xenowing, who, let me remind you, was also corrupted by the Dark Energem in his past and knows exactly how awful it is, embraces his young apprentice and with the last of his magic accepts the corruption onto himself, perishing in the process and drifting into the abyss of space. Yeah, I told you that the Power Rangers comics can get dark, and they will kill characters in tragic ways, made even more tragic by Xenowing's final words: "Try to be good, Heckle, and try to be happy this time." And that is the end of the flashback scene. There is no more dramatic fight after this. This is just Heckle having to deal with the consequences of his actions. Arcanon is defeated, Sentai 6 is saved, but because Heckle escalated, because Heckle was so afraid of what his enemies might have, he decided to strike first, and his mentor died in the process. I'll read the monologue here because, once again, the symbolism is very clear. Heckle says, "I hung in the stillness, the cold, listening. Long after his voice had faded, I listened. Sentai 6 was saved, and all the people on it, innocent, unknowing. Lord Arcanon was destroyed, and the Energem beyond his reach. But I could not go home. How could I walk the places my teacher had walked and know he was no more because of me? How could I look into the faces of my friends and see in their eyes the knowledge of what I had done?" So, you see what I mean about the nuke thing? Personally, I don't think it's very subtle. The Dark Ranger's entire origin story is about how war is always going to be bad, and even if a large strike like this ends the war and saves the many, it's saving the many at the cost of the few, and while that might end the war, it's not a good outcome. People are still hurt. Now, as I've said a few times, this thing that I was just discussing was a flashback scene in a larger arc of the Power Rangers comic, and I'm not going to go into that in detail today because it's a whole larger thing, but I will absolutely talk about Heckle's role within it. The Dark Ranger is a main character in the Beyond the Grid arc. This was not a one-shot or anything like that. He is one of the core Ranger team that we are following during this time. The group in Beyond the Grid is a bunch of these scattered, isolated Rangers. They are not one team who is all formed at the same time. It is 6th Rangers and extra characters who are all stranded together in another dimension, and it's very good. I would highly recommend reading it. You get to see Heckle come to terms with his past and address his trauma, making friends with people who have similar experiences from being a Ranger and seeing the dark sides of that. Also, because I know people are going to mention it if I don't, he does get a different set of Ranger powers during this arc. He becomes part of the Solar Rangers team. Again, that is part of this larger Power Rangers comic thing, not for today's video, and the reason I'm not going into detail here is the Solar Ranger powers he gains are temporary to this arc. Once it's done, he loses them and goes back to being the Dark Ranger. This note is almost where the story of the Dark Ranger ends, and in fact for a while it was where it ended. He has the Dino Charge arc, he goes back in time, he unleashes the Power Rangers equivalent of a nuke, but then comes to terms with that and tries to atone for his past. He remains the Dark Ranger and goes on more adventures protecting people. But remember, I've said a couple times that the comics and the show are not the same continuity, so let's address that. As a brief refresher, just so we're all on the exact same page, the Dino Charge series ends with Heckle in the past as the new Guardian, and then the comics pick up from that point with him returning to Sentai 6. The show doesn't show that part, and technically never does, but Heckle as the Dark Ranger does make an appearance. In Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, the final Power Rangers show to exist in the show continuity that has been going for 30-something years, he just kind of appears. And when I say that in a very weird, abrupt way, yep, that is how it is handled. Boy, this is going to be such a tone shift as we move away from the darker comics back to the kids show, but that's just how it's got to be, I guess. In Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, Lord Zed takes over Earth, like successfully. He manages to exile the main Ranger team at the time to a far-off planet, and in their absence, he successfully conquers stuff with several of his alien allies. While the Rangers are gone, a resistance forms on Earth, and Heckle, as the Dark Ranger, is just there and part of them. Now, if you've really been paying attention and tracking the timelines, which honestly, if you haven't been doing that, I don't blame you because they're kind of weird, something might seem odd about that. Remember, at the end of Dino Charge, they split off into a different timeline where dinosaurs still exist. And that is not the status quo of Power Rangers going forward. They just kind of leave it arbitrarily, where the Dino Charge team are existing in a branched timeline with dinosaurs, and they are treated as a multiverse thing from that point on, with the other shows existing in the main continuity and Dino Charge being treated as an AU. So then how is Heckle here? Well, fear not, the show does address the fact that Heckle's story begins in another dimension. In fact, I'll actually just play you the clip right now.
My story began in another dimension where I was very evil. But after a classic redemption arc, I became a ranger? Eventually, yes. I'm a good egg now. Anyway, hold it!
Huh. Okay. So it's a little bit of a speed run when it comes to the Dark Ranger's backstory, but credit where credit is due, that is also kind of in character for Heckle. Regardless, that is the only explanation we get as to the Dark Ranger's appearance in the show. Yeah, Cosmic Fury doesn't really make any effort to explain how or why Heckle showed up in the main continuity for this Lord Zed invasion. I mean, they can do multiverse crossovers. The rest of the Dino Charge Rangers have appeared in things before, but in this case, they don't really want to explore the reasoning behind it. So why did this happen? Well, now I get to go back to a wording thing that I chose very intentionally way back at the beginning of this video, which is that in Power Rangers, if something is cool, you can just kinda do it. While I don't know this for 100% certain, I am pretty convinced that the only reason the Dark Ranger shows up for a couple of shots in Cosmic Fury is that the writers on that show liked the comics and wanted to take this opportunity in the last series that Power Rangers was ever going to make to just canonize the Dark Ranger in any way that they could. I've said it like 3 times now, but I'll say it one more. Remember, the comics continuity is entirely separate. It is not even in the same multiverse, it is an isolated thing. That means, technically, before this, we didn't know what happened to the original Heckle from the live-action show. We know a thing that could have happened because it happened in the comics, but that was never considered canon. And this was just a way for them to real quickly handwave canonize that. The specifics of this origin and the incredibly dark war allegory never specifically addressed, but his story certainly begins in another dimension, and so we can just assume that at some point in the interim, live-action Heckle went through this same arc, saved Sentai 6, Zeno Wing died, and then he did this multiverse crossover in Cosmic Fury. Is this incredibly stupid? Yes. Are the Dark Ranger's few appearances in Cosmic Fury kind of weird and out of place? Yes. Am I going to argue with it though? No, absolutely not. And you want to know why? Because the Dark Ranger has been my favorite Power Ranger since the comics, and I even liked him as a villain in Dino Charge. So am I going to argue with any excuse to give him a couple live-action fight scenes? No! No, I am not! Put him in there! Sadly, from Cosmic Fury on, the Dark Ranger has not really been addressed. Largely because Power Rangers has barely been addressed, Hasbro seems very content to let that franchise rot despite how popular it is. Yes, I know there is production stuff happening for a new show, apparently, but there have been rumors of that for a while now, so I gotta be real, I'll believe it when I see it. Now, as we reach the conclusion of this video, I'm going to try to shift the tone a little bit back to where it was at the midpoint. This was a tonal roller coaster to try and record since we started at the show and then went to the comics and then had to go back to the show for a little bit at the end. However, I think it's pretty clear that the midpoint is really where the meat of this storyline is. For a character who only appears in Ranger form for a singular arc, Heckle's story as the Dark Ranger is absolutely wild, and I hope that middle section on the comics makes it kinda clear why I like him so much. Literally everything about this character is cool on several levels. For surface level Power Ranger stuff, his design is incredibly awesome, and his powers are interesting. I don't know if you guys caught it during the fight scene, but yeah, Heckle absolutely keeps his lightning abilities that he has as an individual once he is Dark Ranger morphed, so he has Force Lightning that he can just zap people with. And even interesting and unique Ranger powers aside, as a Ranger, he is incredibly strong. The Dark Ranger by himself is enough to beat a boss-level villain for the show and his entire army single-handedly. And that's totally fine, right? There's nothing bad that's going to come of that whatsoever. See, the funny thing about the Dark Ranger is his power, and his level of power is actually the most important thing about his story, and that's pretty rare for comic book and show characters. I've said it many times, and I'm going to say it again here. Typically, I think that the things a character can't do are more interesting than the things that they can. But in the Dark Ranger's case, I don't think that applies. Heckle's storyline is about the risks of power. It is about the fact that the pursuit of that power can hurt plenty of people, innocents who can get caught in the crossfire. Even if your pursuit of power is noble, even if it is for the sake of defense, if you take that escalation too far, the weapon has been made and you can't unmake it. To call back to Zenowing's quote when this idea of the Dark Ranger was first brought up, he says very simply, "We don't need a soldier, we need a shield." And even though Power Rangers is often seen as a very cheesy franchise, which is true, this is a lesson that is very important. The moral of the Dark Ranger is simply that heroes are supposed to defend people, and if you get too obsessed with who could be attacking you, then you risk losing sight of the people you're trying to protect. Heckle was a man who experienced a whole lot of darkness, much of which wasn't his fault, but still was something that he had to go through, and even after that corruption had been purged from him, he still focused on attack rather than protection. Was Lord Arcanon a threat? Yes, absolutely he was, but he was not an immediate one. There was time to save Sentai 6 and everyone on it through peaceful means, but Heckle's obsession with the enemy was what ended up being his downfall. The tragic fact of this, and the thing that causes the guilt which defines Heckle's character for a long time after this, is that he started this war. He is the one that made the first move because he was so terrified of what Arcanon might do in the future. And even though his cause is noble, even though he was trying to defend people, defense should never be a justification to start a war, because war is always going to end with somebody getting hurt. Now, far be it from me to say that protection is bad, even if you have to use violence to do it. This is Power Rangers after all. There are going to be big scary monsters out there that the heroes have to fight. But the heroes don't strike first. To quote Zenowing one final time, heroes should be the shields, not the soldiers. Heroes don't start wars, and whoever does start a war bears the burden of anyone who is hurt by it. Whoever thought that Power Rangers of all things could have a moral like that? God, I love this stupid series. This was a fun one to record. Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I am sorry that it took me so long to get this video out. I had to go on a brief unexpected hiatus because part of my apartment flooded. But don't worry, everything is fine now and I'm back to work, so it's all good. Quick typical announcements and plugs and stuff to wrap everything up. First off, I do have a Patreon, and let me also take this moment to say big extra thank you to the people who already support me over there. If you check out that Patreon, you can get early and ad-free access to all of my YouTube videos and an exclusive video every month. There are 3 of those out right now on Marvel characters Stingray, Captain Citrus, and 3D Man. So if you want to know more about those, go and check them out. My username over there is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link in the description of this video and my channel page. It's very easy to find. Supporting me there does really help me keep doing this as my full-time job, so one more big shout out to everyone who already does. Finally, one more shout out to the artist I work with for these videos, Ruben Perez. He draws the character that you've been watching talk at you for the last 40-ish minutes or so. I always love working with him, so check him out as well. And with that, this one is finally complete. Thank you all one more time for watching this video. And since I'm now behind, thanks to my little forced week vacation, I'm gonna go get started on the next one immediately. So I will see you all pretty soon.